Okay, good evening, everyone. Happy to have you here, spending your evening with us again at Immigrant, Techies, Alberta. So I'm just going to quickly go through what we're about as Immigrant, Techies, Alberta. So I'll be sharing my screen. So we are a tech enthusiast group for professional immigrants or those who just are curious about tech. Like, it's not exclusive to that, but it's primarily for professional immigrants who are in tech or curious about tech or just want to, just exploring the space, or they're already in the system. Maybe they have the background already and they're trying to find out how they fit in the Alberta tech ecosystem. So this group is where we just explore what's out there, demystify the concepts, bring in people to just share ideas, to talk about, share their experience, especially real life experience, how they can translate all these tech skills into careers. Like, what does this all mean? What does innovation mean? How does it translate to each person being able to grow their career, or even if they want to have a startup? So we represent a bridge into Alberta's innovation community, a space for those interested in tech where they can explore and just create this opportunity for networking and mentorship. So we try to curate emerging tech content, event resources, career opportunities. We do it in partnership with other organizations who have the same strategy. And the goal is to provide community and support for professional immigrants and every other person exploring the space, the tech space in Alberta, who desire to pivot or advance in their tech careers. So ultimately, we want to rewrite the narrative about Alberta that the fact that oil and gas is going down does not mean Alberta is going down. So there's a lot more we have going for us here, and we want people to know that. And we want immigrants to keep coming here. This is a great place to live. So that's the whole point of this group. And tonight we have Javier Cuero. I should have asked before.
Yeah.
Is that the right way to say it?
Yep. Well,
Yeah. Oh, great. So I should have asked before. Sorry about that. And Javier is currently the managing director for data enablement and human insights at ATB Financial. And he also is an immigrant, which is like a great add to this conversation. Like, it's great to know how somebody was able to navigate that system and is in a place where they can give back to community and actually share their insight and their story. So we're really excited to have you tonight, Javier. Um, Let me just say a little more about your background. He also has background in research, which I really found neat. Like, I like the idea of being able to translate academia to actual work, to actual bettering people's life, because that gap has existed for a while, where it's as if all these skills we are learning in academia stays in there. It's just about research and writing papers, but having Javier here, who has actually translated it to human experience, is pretty exciting. So I'll let Javier do the rest of the talking. Welcome.
thank you very much. Like, first of all, I'm very humble for the invitation. I hope I can add value to the conversation and contribute to the community. I'm gonna start. I prepared a few slides, but really I'm looking forward having a conversation and make it as interactive as possible. Uh, can you see my screen? I'm not sure.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I will send them. And if I look to the other side, because I have two screens, so it's not that I'm ignoring you, it's that I might be looking away from the camera.
Mm-hmm.
So
Your
yeah,
your sound your sound is a little distant. If you can,
okay. I'll
yeah.
bring the computer a little bit. Is it better now?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Um, and as Umi said, I'm currently the managing director of Data and Human Insights with ATV Financial. So I think you can go to LinkedIn and look me up, and you will see about my background, like the details and all that. I think that's boring. I don't like to talk a lot about myself. So let's talk about what the team that I work with does a little bit, and then let's open up for conversation. Um, so what I was hoping to cover today was some applications of data analysis to people dynamics and people analytics, solving day-to-day operational problems with data within the context of what we do at ATV. Uh, I also wanted to talk about what is important and what is that we learned in academic work that is transferable, and maybe how, at least for me, it has worked and what that journey has been, and what I have learned from that experience. And maybe a little bit of, probably if you are all in tech and if you are all data driven, this is not news. Data scientists are on demand. There is a lot of prospect that I can contribute a little bit to that conversation as well. So first of all, what is people analytics? And I would start maybe with the data that we typically use when doing our work, and then I would provide some clear examples of how that translates into business value. But people analytics is really data analytics. We just happen to use data sources that are related to typically to human resources, but also to anything that the enterprise can connect to what people do and say. So the typical data sources that we use, we can generally group them into two big camps. One of them is what we call operational data, things like organizational structure. For example, I am a managing director, so that will be my job title. Uh, People and culture, that will be my business units. And human insights and data enablement, that will be my department. And those are attributes that every employee will have. And all that data and many more pieces of data are stored in what is called the HRIS, or the Human Resources Information System. It's like a CRM, but for the internal people. And that's the biggest database that we have of organizational structure. With that, then we can ask questions, or we also have data about employee movement. So by employee movement, what I mean, people are joining the organization, people are leaving the organization, and people are moving within the organization. And also, as similar to the attributes as where I fit in the organization, there are other attributes like my age, my gender, uh, and so on. So those are the typical operational type of data. There are other sources of data, for example, uh, organizations, depending on the size, they might have a learning management system. So all the learning that employees go through, that's also stored there. We can also have a different vendor that does the talent acquisition for us. So let's say your company works with Monster, then you would have Monster database also to use for your analysis, and so on and so forth. The second group for data sources for people analytics is what we call employee experience data. And this is more like the soft data that typically is collected through employee surveys. So a typical example would be employee engagement. Um, a lot of people talked about employee engagement. That's one of many employee surveys that we can have. And also there is a non-solicited free feedback that you could be, that an enterprise could be collecting as a ask me anything type of box, or as a anytime feedback. That's how we call it at ATV. So this is constantly collecting data, but it's more of what is called team member sentiment data. So really the richness of and the interesting things to do in people analytics are when we are connecting these two worlds of what people are doing and what they are in the organization with what they are saying. And the next step is to connect then that with business results. And that's when you really can drive value to the organization. So the typical problems that we can solve using people analytics are of many different dimensions. I'm just selecting few here just to provide a little bit of context. But the first thing is to look internally to the human resources business, and without data, like you can go with anecdotal data, and human resources as actually used to be and maybe still is a big chunk of that natural connection and communication among people, and those stories in the hallways. Well, not so much in the hallways nowadays, but that type of anecdotal data, although it has its value, it's very difficult to make business decisions based on that anecdotal data in order to improve human resources practices and processes. So we are moving to a position in which we are collecting data of our systems and how people interact with those systems in order to make changes to policies or processes to provide a better experience for our team members. And at ATV, our employees, we call them team members. So if I use the two words, they mean the same thing to us. The second or a second way of using this data is for strategic workforce management. So if you understand your workforce and you understand what the market, or have at least an idea of how the market is going to be changing or where it's moving to, being prepared for that, even for seasonal activities, it's very important, and that's part of the value that we can bring to the organization for collecting, managing, and having available the data in a clean and usable way. Also understanding human capital. And by human capital, what I mean is everything that we contribute to the organization that goes beyond just doing the work, right? So your experience, the learning that you are doing, all that, if it's digitalized and if that data is collected. In our case, we use the grid, which is an open platform, like you can use it as a person, but we also use it within the organization to curate content for learning. We can look at all that, and with many different intentions, we can use it to try to understand what the skills gaps uh, the organization has with respect to what we think, or what the market or what the research is telling us that the banking and financial industry is moving towards, which cool. So there are some interesting problems that we would like to solve, is the upscaling and rescaling of our workforce, right? So you need to understand what the skills are now, what the skills are going to be in the future, and who might have a little, a smaller effort to make the jump and help those to do that. And those that might need a little bit more of help, try to understand what is that help that they will need in order to be ready for the future. For example, a typical example, this is not something that we have done, but some other vendors do, and we are trying to partner with them, is someone that they are, due to automation and artificial intelligence, there is a lot of work, a lot of jobs that are at risk, and there are different levels of risk for different positions. One professional position that you would not think that it is kind of at risk is actually accounting, because accounting, doing spreadsheets, like that's something that robots can do much better than we do, even artificial intelligence. But on the flip side, the type of skills, not only the technical skills, but even the soft skills and the personality traits that a lot of people in accounting have, are very easy to transfer to cybersecurity, which is a job that is a hot skill. So if we can identify these patterns and we can identify these gaps, then we can create learning plans for people to move into positions out of positions that are going to be abolished in the future into positions that are going to be in demand. Sorry, that are going to abolish in the future. Yeah, to positions that are going to be in demand at that same time. So that's when we talk about strategic, understanding human capital. That is really what we are talking about. And also we are interested in understanding ways of working, especially now with a lot of people, most, like I would say, I probably can say exact numbers, but I won't. But like 80% of the corporate office is working from home right now at the bank, right? We have the team members that are still at branches, and the way that we work at branches has changed due to COVID. But understanding how this is going to play out with along with the facilities, and when we come back to a normal or whatever normal is going to be, understanding all these dynamics is very important, and that's part of what we are also trying to first understand what we need to understand, like identify the gaps, and then once we have those, then we will have to look for the data that is going to help us solve those problems. Being more specific on the examples, things that actually the team has worked on, the simplest thing, and I don't know if you're familiar with the typical maturity curve for data analytics. Like you go from something that is descriptive, analytics that are diagnostics, looking forward to moving to predictive, when eventually you can be prescriptive, right? And to be fair, to move along that maturity curve, it requires a lot of efforts in many different fronts, from the back end and making sure that you have clean data that then the analysts and the data scientists can use, and they don't spend 80% of their time cleaning and managing the data. That's a big impediment. Even if you have the skills and the technical resources to do it, you still won't be able to add value at that level if you don't solve the foundational problems and the infrastructure problems to set up your analytics shop in a proper way. So we have been moving into that maturity curve, and our team, I can confidently say that we are very strong in the diagnostics so far, and we have done some projects into the predictive. I think this year is going to be like we spent the last 2 years really building up the back end. And now this year we are already seeing the benefits of having done that in capacity that has become available to do more predictive analytics. So, but to get there, you have to do, you have to put your foundation in a strong position. And a lot of that is to provide self-service analytics or self-service reporting for your users. And a key element to that is the development of dashboards and BI products. So the team has built the dashboards and report engines that the organization uses for getting data and visualizations about ATV's workforce. So that's been a lot doing the dashboards, building those dashboards, and building the infrastructure that is supporting those dashboards has been a lot of the work that the team has done in the last couple of years. But with that, we have been able to move into more predictive type of analytics. One particular example was a year ago when the pandemic hit and all these models were going around. We knew that we could not just use that model and try to apply it to our particular population at ATB. So we needed to develop a model that was a bit more representative, still an idealization of what really would happen, to have an idea of what the impact and under different scenarios would be to our workforce, in particular those jobs that were deemed essential for functioning within the organization. So we spent it was a lot of time, but in a very short period of time, in the sense it was very dense and condensed, trying to figure what to do to a way in which we at least knew how big our uncertainties were, because one thing that I always say about models is all models by definition are wrong. They are approximations to something. Some of them are useful. So trying to understand what is the level of usability of a model, that's the most important thing. So I'm not going to claim that we had a COVID-19 model that was very, very good at it, but it was a model that we could understand and that we knew the limitations. And with that, we could provide um, advice to the executive about should we panic or let's keep on looking at the data and we tell you when to panic. And fortunately, I think we gauge those uncertainties very well, and we have been able to manage through the pandemic very effectively and very efficiently. And also, I guess, thankfully, the impact hasn't been as bad as anyone would have predicted at the beginning, or how everyone was scared at the beginning of the pandemic. And we kind of rationalized that and saw it, and were able to function with minimum. I won't say minimum disruption because the disruption has been huge, but managing the disruption in a way that didn't affect us that bad.
Javier, if you don't
Yeah,
mind me jumping in for a little bit,
yes,
and I don't know if you are going to cover this in your slides or not, but what are some of the tools you actually use?
yeah,
I
for
think it would
sure.
be great to mention some of those. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So ATV itself is a Google shop. So we ditch Microsoft and we use Google G Suite. And we are right now in the process of moving to the Google Cloud. So GCP, Google Computing Cloud. Um, and there, the main database is BigQuery, uh, which is a version of SQL. Our data is still we have a SQL server that we manage, and that's our foundation. On top of that layer, we have Tableau as our main dashboard tool. We also use Data Studio for the smaller things, whichever tool has its value. ATV used to be, or still is actually, a very SaaS uh, oriented organization that is changing, and we are moving more towards Python uh, within the GCP environment. Uh, we also use SPSS, R. I try to be agnostic. Whatever tool solves the problem and whatever tool the analyst or the data scientist feels more comfortable to solve the problem, that's the scientific problem. When it goes to talking to the business, then Tableau definitely is the tool of choice. Um, yeah, that's with respect to data mangling and data storage and BI solutions. For the team member experience piece, for the surveys, we use Qualtrics, which is a very, very strong option for managing, organizing, and analyzing survey data. They also do customer experience. They have a suite for team member experience. We use the team member experience suite. They were bought by SAP at some point, and our core banking system is SAP too, so that had an advantage. Yeah, that had an idea. But they spun it out through an IPO. So Qualtrics is back now by itself, but they still have a very strong roadmap on integrating with SAP, which was something that we appreciate. Um, what else do we use? I would say those are the main
Mm-hmm.
tools that we use.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that's a lot of tools. So for someone that is looking to get into that space for career, would you say they need to know all of that, or is it more
No,
of learn as you go kind of thing?
no. I think it is good that you at least know very well one of these, at least one very well. So that will be your foot in. That's how, like when I joined ATV. So I've been with ATV 4.5 years, and I started as a data scientist in back then it was the enterprise data science team. And as I said, ATV was very, very SaaS centric. I never used SaaS before I joined ATV, but I knew SQL, I knew Python. You quickly, programming languages is easier to learn a programming language if you already know another one. It's easier to learn a programming language than an actual spoken language, I say. Like I still have a lot of troubles with English. I think I learn much more quicker SAS that I've been learning English for. Um, but what my recommendation would be, like if you are in the technical space, probably you will already know at least one of these tools to a degree of competency that you can say that you are really good at it. And you just need to be open to learn other tools. I think something that I would recommend if you have no experience whatsoever, let's say if you're on the very technical side, like you are a programmer or you are a database person, to have at least some exposure and experience with a dashboarding tool, be it Data Studio. The easiest one will be Google Data Studio because it is free. Like if you have a Gmail account, you have access to Google Data Studio and you can use your own spreadsheets to play with it. Tableau has become, I think, an industry standard in BI, but obtaining a Tableau license is more complicated. There is Microsoft, what's the name of Microsoft? I forgot the name of the Microsoft solution for BI, but it does, they all work very, like the principles in which they work are all very similar. So at least you don't need to be an expert, but maybe get familiar with the principles of building dashboards and how to present data in a visual manner. That's always useful. Um, Especially how to tell stories with data. Even if you don't have the skills of building the dashboard yourself, if you are able to tell a good story with the data that you have in real world settings, that's golden. Like that's really what people at the in organizations are looking at. Like they will be impressed if you can show them all these calculations, but they will be even more impressed if you can tell them simply what to do with them.
Mm.
So that's the main thing. Um, Going back to some of the things that we have been doing, we develop, and this is more in the front of the team member experience side, we develop organizational culture model that became a KPI. So this is something that is in parallel to engagement, to team member engagement. We realized as an organization that that engagement model that we were using wasn't as helpful for us because we were workforce that was highly engaged, like 92% engagement. It's very difficult to do it with that strategic.
Somebody is okay. Sorry about that. I have
No worries.
muted them.
Um, so that engagement model became obsolete to us. So we embarked in a over 2 years project in doing research internally of what would be a good engagement or a good cultural organizational cultural index would be for us. And we developed that. More on the machine learning side, we developed a model for risk of calculating the risk of people leaving and why they might leave the organization. And now we are delving into organizational network analysis for trying to understand that piece of how we work. Like, are we working in a network environment? Are we still very siloed? If we think that we are a network environment, what are the silos that still exist, and try to understand those people dynamics. That's part of what we are trying to do.
And
So
what would you say has been the ROI for all of these applications of data? Is it like
yeah,
is it something that you find valuable that more and more companies will invest in because of the return on investment?
definitely. And I think it's early. Well, I mean, that's so. In particular, for example, and this is maybe by saying this, you will get an idea of some of the value that this already provides. So before I joined the team, uh, so as I told you, we use SAP is our core banking system, and attached to SAP, there is a different module that is the Human Resources Information System. So this is the HRIS, and what we use is something that works with SAP that is called success factors. Like it may or may not mean anything to you, but just to give you a little bit of context. They have, Success Factor has its own data analytics platform for human resources data. For reasons that I don't think are that much relevant, our implementation was crappy, and we couldn't really leverage that piece of the program. So that's why we decided to build it internally, and that's why we have a SQL server and all that. But the license for that one is 300,000 American dollars a year. So that's the value that organizations are willing. I can say that we save the company 300,000 every year just because we are doing internally. But even if you don't have an internal team devoted to that, that's the value that organizations are given just for the sake of having something that will allow you to inspect the HR data, let alone all the. I wish we had this tomorrow, in the sense that I could actually give you the all return of investment, because one of my team members is doing that for a presentation tomorrow. Oh. So I would have like a number, a more circle number of what it's the value that we provide in a dollar amount. But I can tell you that, yes, it's something that organizations, especially bigger organizations, right? Like if you are in a startup with 10 people, probably not much value, because all these analytics are, the value is in the numbers, right? ATV is an organization of 5,300 people. That's the size, even smaller, like 1,000 people. Try to understand the dynamics and the clusterings of things among 1,000 people is not really obvious. When you get into the hundreds, and especially you have them like if that's where the value for this type of analytics it stops being as big, because it's you don't get the statistics to provide that value. If I
Okay, I don't want to sidetrack your presentation again,
no.
please.
Anyone, please, anyone, if you have questions, I much rather have. I have slides just as a backup, but if we rather have an interactive session, that'll be great. Like I much rather have that. And I think I'm done as far as it goes with the what the team does and what is my day to day these days, and the value that we provide to the organization. And I was shifting to the size or to the theme of the value of academic training. So I don't know if anyone has more questions from the previous section that are burning questions, or I just can go on.
On the chat, Igor was asking if you use Jupyter. I think he means Jupyter Notebook.
Yeah,
as one of your tools.
Yeah, right now not so much, to be honest. But as we move to the GCP environment, and Python being the main analytics engine, the Jupyter books are going to be an essential tool for storytelling, right? Like it's really easy to have all that in that environment. The drawback of that environment is not so good for batch type of work, at least for me. And again, like I haven't done actual work in a long time. My job now is more making sure that the team is working on the right things, and they are getting the right support. But back in the day when I used to do this, I would much rather do the type of like heavy batch work outside of Jupyter books and like just standalone scripts. But I see more and more the usability and fashionability of that environment.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay, and if I were to summarize, at least from my experience, and just to recap, like I spent a lot of time in academia as a student before. I did my undergrad in Venezuela, where I'm from. Then I did a master's in California. Then I came to Edmonton to do my PhD. And then I spent 4 years as a postdoc before jumping out the academia. So I did all through that a lot of research and a lot of academic work. I worked at as a researcher after my PhD. I worked at the U of A, then I worked at an institute at UC, and then I came back to the National Institute for Nanotechnology in Edmonton. So I've done research in various environments, and really the value there is to have learned and to have been trained with a systematic approach to tackle and maybe solving complex problems. Like that's really the value. I mean, I did my PhD in statistical quantum mechanics. So like that has nothing to do with people. That has nothing to do with pipelines. That is another field that I did actual work on. But it is a complex system. It is a complex problem. And I did have to go through a process to do research in that field. And really that way of thinking that academic training provides you in being systematic about approaching problems and not being scared about the complexity of the problems, I think that's been the most valuable thing that it has left. If I want to be a little bit more specific on some of the transferable skills that I think have been important, and I hope none of these, maybe the last one is new to you or that you haven't thought about it, is especially when you come, like me coming from a very like computational physicist type of mindset to work into HR, those are very different worlds. And actually the fact that I approach things and problems in a very different way adds a lot of value to the organization that I'm working with. So don't shy away for things that are unfamiliar to you. Bring that perspective that you have along with you. And I think it's gonna pay like a lot in it's also almost good to have and I don't know if that's something about me or something about academic world, but being a healthy cynicism sometimes is good to bring organizations sometimes tend to become very complacent in the way they do things and the way they work. And I think that some of the value that I brought and I've been provided that feedback is that I'm not shying away to have contrasting opinions as long as you can support why you think that way, right? Is not to say I think you're wrong. That doesn't get you anywhere. What gets you places is, well, I think that this can be done better because of this, and we have tried this, and this is what we got. So that approach to things, even if it's very contrarian to what the organization might be doing at the moment, if you do it that way, uh, you're not the negative Nancy. you're providing a different point of view that is sustained by data and by knowledge. It's not just an opinion. It's something that can be tested. And that's something that I think is very natural for people that have been engaged in academic work, in particular for people that have been engaged in academic work in a scientific manner, right? Like and me being trained as a scientist. Also, that part of being able to communicate complex concepts in simple ways, the higher up, the dumber the the presentation it needs to be. Like when you are presenting to your peers, you are very technical. When you're presenting to your manager, you go one level up. When you're presenting to the executive, you make it even dumber. And when you're presenting to the CEO, it's almost cartoons what you need to present. But those cartoons need to be impactful. They need to give the information across. It's not that you are dumbing enough for the sake of making it dumb. The CEO is actually a very, very smart person, but they don't have the time that you have to understand all the details of what you are doing to come up with a conclusion so they can make the big decisions. So it's not making it easier for the sake of making it easier. It's that you need to understand, or it's useful to understand why you need to make it easier for them. And it's really a matter of, if you think you're busy trying to figure out your problems, multiply that for 1,000. That's the CEO's job. So they really need to have the information and the things condensed in a way that they understand the why, they know what the actions, they have to make a decision typically, but they understand the context, they understand what's the reality, and you support that with some recommendations. That could be, do this or do 180. And if you do this, we think A and B is going to happen. And if you do the complete opposite, what we are seeing is that C and D is going to happen. And then he can make, or she can make that decision of what, in a more informed way. But trying to explain that you have used a neural network that has 22 hidden layers, and you change the transfer function to an exponential because that was cool, he doesn't care, or she doesn't care. It's really what you do with that, what matters. Believe it or not, if you wrote a thesis, you actually manage a project. So you can put in your resume, I have project management skills. You took something from nothing to the end with a bunch of gates. That's project management. You just need to learn how to sell that as a project management skill. Hopefully you did graduate and have a thesis to say that. If you didn't, nothing wrong with that, but maybe that will be a harder case. And something that I don't think we are aware is that in the last maybe 5-7 years, it's been a wave of bringing to corporate, outside of software development teams, the agile method as a way of working. And you may or may have not thought about how the scientific method works, but it's pretty much agile, right? Like you have a hypothesis, you test it quickly, you look what it worked. If it didn't work, you try something else, and you do that in incremental steps. That's agile. That's what agile means. Instead of trying to think in a waterfall way, what the project needs to look like in 2 years, you go step by step, adding value in each step, and making sure that you're solving a problem in each step. And that's something that I think people with academic and research training do very naturally, that they don't know that they are doing agile and how marketable that is to the workplace right now. So that will be kind of my take on some of the transferable skills that you may have that you haven't thought about, that can help you to jump from an academic type of work into I call it sometimes real work, real world work, because we in academia you tend to live in the ivory tower, and it's sometimes hard to live and to even not only to live, but to picture yourself doing something different, because you have built a concept of yourself that is very attached to what you do and how you do it, and you don't see that in a different environment. You need to take away that and be willing to take risks. Now jumping into career prospects in data science, I think this is well known. Like if we are all in the tech industry, these data scientists, machine learning, BI developer, data analyst, statistician, and many, many more, like anything that has to do with data is a hot skill right now, both in the back end, in the development side, and in the analyst and data scientist side. Like all of those are very hot in the market right now. I think more than and tell you what the prospects are, I think it might be of more value. What kind of strategies have worked for me in traveling and in that journey in the marketplace. And one thing that you all know now, because we are here, is connect with the community, right? Whatever that community is, make an effort of connecting. When I started to think about that switch from academia, the first thing that I did is, as a postdoc, I joined a student group, just because I didn't know what else to do. But and I wanted to be exposed to different things of what I was exposed. That led me to be part of a business pitch competition that then I won. Then that connected me with local investors, and then they connected me to a broader uh, network of the innovation space in Edmonton. Just because taking that step of connecting with the community. Then the second thing is don't stop there and contribute to the community. Once I belonged to that student group, then I connected with, at that time, that was like 10 years ago now, there was this group that I think it still exists. It's not run by the same person anymore, but it's called Alberta Council of Technologies. At that time, it was run by a gentleman called Perry Kincaid. Maybe some of you know Perry. Like, he's a known person in the innovation community in Alberta. And they organized the first conference on big data and analytics in Alberta about 10 years ago. I contributed with them in helping organizing that conference, and that gave me again exposure in a different capacity to a bunch of people that then became part of my network. And then that brings to the third point, which is network, but network the right way. So, and by that, I learned from Perry, and this is not something that maybe like in this video conference it's gonna show us evidently, but when you network and when you connect with someone, you typically do it like this, like you shake hands like this, right? And the meaning of that is that we are equal, like we are all giving something. You don't do it like this. You don't network asking for a job or asking people what do you have that I can. That's not the way to network. The way to network is to offer the value that you have first, and that then is going to be remunerated. So never ask. Well, I won't say never ask, but it is much better if instead of saying, hey, if you meet someone and, oh, and do you have a job that I can do? It's much better saying, it's almost the same, but you just say, well, this is what I know how to do very well. Do you think that will be useful? How can I help you? And that is an approach that it's much better. And it has at least worked for me much better than going to network events and giving my business card and thinking, oh, call me if you have a job. Like that never works. It's always offer your value. At the same time, never give your value away for free. And not like volunteer is good when it's something that you are doing for the community. But I would shy away from volunteering as a way of getting into a job. You don't need to charge full time. You can always learn from what you are doing, and that probably has more value than the money that they can pay you. But at the same time, be respectful of your own time, because that way you're showing people that you respect their time too. And that you don't need to oversell yourself, and you don't need to charge $100 an hour or anything. And unless there is a clear way that there is a win-win situation, or someone that really doesn't have the resources, like if you're going as a co-founder or a third or fourth person in a startup, of course, that's a different situation. But if you are going to volunteer for a big organization, they certainly have the money to pay you something, and you are doing a favor to yourself in acknowledging that you have a value and that you recognize that, and let them know that you recognize that. And of course, final thing, like, stay up to date with your trade. Don't lag on don't get caught up in conversations and not knowing what they're talking about when you're supposed to know what you're talking about. That's very important to stay up to date and be current. And yeah, I think I'll stop here, and we have a few more minutes for people to, if they have questions.
Wow, thank you so much, Javier. That was packed. Like, there's a lot of value in that presentation. I'm sure everybody agrees. Igor definitely agrees. And something I would like to ask before we go to the questions is, you mentioned some of the roles in data. Can you quickly touch on them? Like, how are they different? What's like
Between which ones?
the roles? You had a slide about
Yeah.
the analyst, the machine learning engineer. Like, what can you touch on each of them briefly and what's needed
Yeah.
for each? Yeah.
So typically, and these are not clear cut, like people in different organizations will call people differently. So I'm gonna give Javier's version of this type. So when I'm looking to hire a data scientist, I'm looking to someone that mainly knows how to do predictive modeling. That's the first thing. It doesn't need to be any specific technique, but they know how to provide foresight. That's what you want data scientists for. Typically, to do that, you have to be really good at understanding the past and historical data so you can provide insightful forecasting. But that's what I'm looking. And I'm looking, data scientists typically is at a level of seniority that you're expecting that person to feel comfortable uh, leading a technical team, and also comfortable presenting their work to non-technical people. That will be in terms of skills and the expectations that I would have when I hire a data scientist. Those are the key things for me. When I'm talking about machine learning engineering, this is someone that really knows their machine learning game. Like this is the people that will be doing a lot of feature engineering. They will be doing probably some research into which methods are the best. This person probably is going to be reporting to the data scientist and supporting the data scientist in that type of function. It doesn't mean that data scientist probably has a background that will allow him to do that, but the type of activities that the data scientist will be engaged are different from what the machine learning engineer will be engaged. Then you have data and system architects. So these are the backend people. So if you translate to tech, you won't find a full stack developer that is from database to data scientist. That's very uncommon. Like maybe there are some unicorns there, but someone that is really good in the backend in database management, or like either relational or non-relational, depending of the type of data that you are dealing with. Uh, those are not necessarily and again, when working in a corporate environment, you have many different data sources that in order to get the value of those, you need to architect your data in a way that you can interact effectively with all these data sources. So that's the type of skills that a data or system architect will have. A BI developer is someone that is really strong building dashboards. So a Tableau, someone that is a master in Tableau, like that. That's by me that's Javier's definition of a BI developer. A data analyst is someone that can take some of what the BI developer and the data scientists are doing and take it and produce insights that are more confined to a certain domain of expertise. So a data analyst is someone junior that may eventually become a data scientist if they have the right background. But it's someone that is doing more of the reporting, small type of analytics, some diagnostic, but not necessarily engaged in the development, but maybe the presentation of more advanced insights. A statistician, well, I think that's...
Sorry, how about business analytics? Is the same as data analytics?
I would, yes. Some people use BA and BI kind of interchangeable, but yeah, a business analyst would be someone related, someone, I would say someone in between the BI and the data analyst. Because when I hire for a business analyst, what I'm thinking is someone that can translate business problems into requirements for the data analyst and for the data scientist. So right now, for example, I don't have any BA in my team. So the BI developer and the data analyst, they are doing the BA. They are doing that engagement with the stakeholders, try to understand their problem and how that problem translates into requirements for something that the team can build. Did that answer your question?
Yes, my second question is, how did you see companies here in Calgary applying this new terminology? Because everybody are talking about the big revolution on digital, but I don't see that many companies, especially in the oil and gas.
That even ourselves and ATV, like we've been on the same thing. That's what I said and preface. I'm going to give you Javier's definition of these titles.
Okay.
I know as a job seeker, I understand how it can be difficult, try to understand what is that people are looking for. So go beyond the title and try to understand what the job is. Hopefully companies are getting better. I know we are very intentional about it to provide a job description that actually helps fill in those gaps that the title might not.
Okay, so if we still have some questions in the chat, I'll let Chisholm ask that. And in the meantime, I'll launch a poll. Please, I'll just do that at the same time because we are at the top of the hour already.
Okay. We just have a few questions from the chat. Samsudin was asking about the tools. He wanted to know whether you make use of Azure and how you use a SaaS for the data analytics.
Yeah, so we don't use Azure because that's Microsoft solution. And as I said, we move out of Microsoft. But I did use Azure when I was at a different organization. So definitely Azure is that's the platform of choice for anyone working in Microsoft environment for machine learning and AI. So yeah, that's really good. SaaS, a lot of the financial models historically were built in SaaS and they haven't been moved in SaaS. So everything that has been built upon those financial models and those results by legacy has been also built in SaaS. And now we have a big problem, a big legacy of SaaS, and we want to move out of it because SaaS cannot be deployed effectively in the GCP environment. They have their own cloud solution called SaaS Via, and we have determined that we want to move as much as we can to the GCP environment.
Yes, Javier, can I jump in? I just wanted to make sure that it is SaaS enterprise guide or base SaaS and not
enterprise.
SaaS. Oh, you're
yeah, it's SAS. Yeah, it's yeah. No, yeah, no SaaS, no SaaS as a service. That's SaaS, like SAS, which is
enterprise
statistical software.
Right.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, that's good.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I have a lot of experience in SaaS. That's why I asked. Thanks. Can I
also, sorry. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Can I just squeeze in another question?
Sure.
Javier, are you in charge of all the customer data too? I believe ATB has hundreds of thousands of customers, or is it only the HR, the people data?
No, ATB does this for the customers too. My domain of expertise and what I do for ATB is with the human resources data. But ATB has a data science team working on projects from, and that's the team that I joined initially, or at least an iteration of that team, which was much smaller when I joined. The type of work that we did then, I was working on a engine recommendation for business, for banking products for our business customers. So that's one of the applications that we have. We currently have, it's not a recommendation that we put to the customer. It's a recommendation that comes to the person that is talking to the customer. And something that we are very proud about that recommendation engine is that it's based on the recommendations that come up are based on optimizing or increasing long-term value. So we are not recommending products for the sake of having a quick win. We think that a product that is providing the client with a long-term value is a product that is going to also bring a long-term value for ATB. So that's the approach that we have taken. Also, I don't know if you know, but ATB is a crown corporation. So we are a bank, a financial institution, but it's owned by the province of Alberta. So our stakeholder is the province of Alberta. So we typically do things in a way that is different because really our stakeholder is Alberta people. So.
Okay, we don't want to take too much of your time, Javier. Is there any more question? Maybe just one last one.
Yes, there's one more. Dave is interested in knowing how you manage privacy with your models. Like when you run a risk of losing an employee, how do you?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. That was actually a project that we have to shut down. Because from the academic point of view, it started as an interesting thing. And then when we started looking at the potential implication, we need to change that in a way, because you are completely right. Like you don't, first of all, everything that we do, and in particular, everything that we do with data that we collect from surveys is strictly confidential. And we only use it at the aggregate level. So for example, for surveys, let's say if a leader have a team of 4 people, they won't get results at that level. They will roll up to the level up, because you need at least 5 responses within a leader for a particular survey for those results to be shown collectively. And we take that very seriously. And again, when you talked about like the calculating the probability of someone leaving, like that, the implications that may have are very high. So at some point, we never thought of using it individually, because again, the model works in a statistical way. So although everyone would have a probability assigned, that individual probability doesn't have a strict meaning. It's the distribution that has a meaning. And then the important things really, it was the model that we overlaid that had, it was basically a principal component analysis on top of it. So it will provide the main reasons why the people were leaving. And then that's when you can action. Because something interesting that we saw is that people that were engaged with learning were the least likely to leave. So that tells us, okay, people that are engaged in learning, something that we can do to improve that is making learning more accessible, changing our learning program, maybe personalize our learning offerings in a way to move that. But that particular project, we have to think about it and put it on hold because of that. And those are the type of things that, I guess, agile or research, like you start working on something and it moves into something that you didn't expect it, and then you have to change.
Okay, thank you so very much, Javier. This was really insightful and full of information. So we appreciate your time and sharing your expertise with us and all of that. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So for our next event, we are inviting Vogue app developers. So because they have this Launchpad program, which is channeled at helping junior developers become intermediate and senior developers. So that's why I ran that poll, just to have a feel for people who might be interested in becoming specialized in iOS or Android development. So yeah, so that's what we'll be having next. So if you're interested in what is out there for helping junior developers become senior developers, or you have people who are interested, please spread the word. That will be on April 20. And if there is nothing else that anyone wants to bring up, thank you so much. It was a really lovely night. I really enjoyed it. Even though I don't know a lot about data, I could understand, like I could grasp a lot of things, even though I don't understand the tech that much. So thank you so much again, Javier.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And with that, I'll say good night, everyone.
Night.
Good night, everyone.
I'll leave the room
Thanks
open
so
for
much,
another
guys.
5 minutes if anyone wants to hang out. But I'll stop the recording now.